I've been thinking a little bit today about the different voices that we have in our lives. We have friends, we have family, we have people around us that speak over us and speak into us. And it's important that we all have that. But my encouragement and reflection today is to press into the voices that don't speak into our past, but speak into our future. You see, I was reading in the Gospel of John a little bit today about how Jesus met up with Peter after his death and resurrection. And of course, we know that before that, Peter denies Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And I can imagine as we put ourselves in the shoes of Peter in that moment, as he's meeting with Jesus and he knows they're going to have a little bit of a conversation, I can imagine that sense of guilt or regret is kind of going on in Peter's heart and in his head. Yet it's interesting that Jesus doesn't once mention what Peter did. Instead, he simply asks the question, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Now go and do this. And I find it fascinating that in our walk with God, even though God more than anybody else has the right to point out our mistakes or point out the issues of our past, very rarely does he do that. And I think that's probably because he knows that we know that ourselves all too well. We read about Paul in writing in the epistles. He will often talk about his past mistakes, his past regrets, his past failures. And I think that God thinks he doesn't need to kind of lay it on any more than that because we know ourselves all too well. But even when we do make mistakes, even when we do get it wrong, it's not so much the mistake that is the most important thing, even though sometimes we can do terrible things. Actually, it's how we respond to that counts. And that's what happens with Jesus and Peter. Jesus was less interested in talking about what Peter did wrong, and he was more interested in talking about what Peter could do right in the future. Paul says this, forgetting what is behind and pressing on towards what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which Christ has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. And as we continue to walk forward in our lives, forgetting what is behind and pressing towards what is ahead, we need to listen to voices in and around us that are going to speak that over us, that are going to speak faith, that are going to speak encouragement, that are going to speak the goodness and the potential of God over our lives. I want to speak to anybody today that's living in that place of regret, or maybe listening to voices over their lives that keep them held back and keep them held in their past, to break free of those chains and to push forward and to listen to the voices in your life that spur you on towards the goal.